started. We've got Dianne Jacono on the left and Josephine Taylor on the right. Dianne Jacono has entered the Biblio since 2020 and came to our attention with every Biblio she's won a prize in our exhibitions. So that's been fabulous, and she has a very long career in art, and she's exhibited at Ballarat, Warrnambool Art Gallery, all sorts of places.
In Melbourne, yeah.
Professional working artist. Josephine Taylor on the other side, I'll just grab a bit from her book. Obviously this is her book, I the Rook. And she's also, are you still editor?
No, I've resigned as that. I was associate editor at Westerly.
There you go.
Yeah. Thanks so much for that, Jo. It's wonderful to be here. I've just come over, my husband John and I have just come over from Perth to be here, so it's a real absolute delight to meet everybody in Port Fairy. Has been so welcoming and lovely to be here at Blarney's, and also to meet Dianne Jacono.
Yeah. You bought my work. You just clapped eyes on it yesterday.
Yeah, that's right. I bought it months ago, but yes, I'd seen many images of it. So yes, I think. Yeah, sure. So, Dianne, did you want to say any more about your background, or did Jo say enough about that?
Yeah, I think she said enough.
Good. All right. Well, we'll just plunge into into questions then. Okay. So, as Jo said, you've won 3 prizes in the Biblio Art Prize. You've won the Storytellers twice and the grand prize with the diorama you made for my book.
Yeah.
Can you tell us how and why you were drawn to the Biblio Art Prize in the first place? How did that come about?
Apparently, the Biblio Art Prize started in 2009. Is that right, Jo?
That's right.
And I think I was here for the first or second one, and I always go around whatever gallery I'm visiting a town. And I came through sheer by accident, came across all this artwork and thought, wow, I'd like to enter my work in that one day, thinking I'm not good enough. And anyway, I've always I've always thought I'm not good enough. But anyway, so it only took me 10 years to get around to it, and I just love the concept of the connection between authors and artists. And the support of authors, the support that making artwork about them supports their writing, which can have its day in the sun for a very short period of time, unfairly, and I think it gives it, another run. And it is so enriching for artists like myself to read books that mean so much to us and then make work about them and give it another dimension. It doesn't have to be accurate, it doesn't have to be what the author intended, it just is my interpretation. And that scope that is given to us when we enter the Biblio Art Prize is, it's a wonderful space in which to respond to books. And I read a lot, so when you connect with a book, it's just really engrossing. You just respond, and there's a lot of drawing goes on, a lot of experimenting. Yeah. So.
I mean, it's equally delightful for a writer to have an artwork, in response to their writing. It's just an extraordinary honour. How did you feel? So, how did you get matched up with my book, which is I Have a Rook?
Random.
And random, okay.
Yeah, you don't get to choose the book, it's chosen for you. Mm-hmm. So you enter the Biblio Art Prize each year or whenever you want it, and then you're allocated a book, and then I always do this as quickly as I can, so I've got a lot of time with the book, because I often read it twice, maybe 3 times. And I put all my markers in everywhere, and then I start drawing, and
And how did you feel when you first read my book? We were talking earlier today, and you sort of were talking about that. Yeah,
and I found it very triggering, very confronting because of my past, and I had to get over that. I just thought, okay, I have to get past this, and I just kept reading. I had to do it chapter by chapter and just give it a day because I was triggering, you know. But I just thought, okay, I'll just do this slowly. I'll do it by stages and I'll make notes and it'll be fine. Just breathe. As you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know whether you think how the artwork made you feel when you saw it.
Oh, I was just blown away. I was tagged on Twitter by a fellow author, Victorian author called Helen Guildfind, H.C. Guildfind, who's written a couple of wonderful books. And she said, "Have you seen this, Jo Taylor?" kind of thing. And I was like, went straight to the image and I was like, what? This is extraordinary, because to have a whole world that you've created in a book brought into kind of, you know, into a visual medium is quite extraordinary. So I was just recovering or getting my head around that. And then it turned out that was actually the results were that evening. So it was the same day that suddenly somebody's saying, "Oh, and this has won the grand prize." And
So this is the work we're talking about.
yeah.
So this is Eye of a Rook. I don't know if you can see this pointer. Where is it? Pointer gone. Oh, yeah.
There it is.
So you can see this is all the elements I've responded to. So there's the rook there. And there's the surgical instruments that Jo will talk about, the premise of the book. And this represents women through time and how they were basically had their agency stripped from them by a process by which they were being treated for a very misunderstood condition and misdiagnosed condition. And we're talking about in Victorian times right through to the present day. And Jo will talk more about that.
So absolutely. When I first saw this, as you can imagine, I actually just started crying because, it was just so wonderful and overwhelming. And obviously, as an artist, the artist chooses what they respond to. So I could see straight away some of the elements from the book that Dianne had responded to. And one of the things I particularly loved about it immediately was the fact that it was a diorama, that it was three-dimensional. So it made me feel like I was going into a little world. But it was also extraordinary because I could see there were elements in there that were sort of alluded to in my book, but had been created in response to the book as well. So it wasn't just about my book, it was actually a creative exchange, which I actually really liked, because for any author, your book goes out into the world and everyone responds to it differently. So it's going to have some elements that I can see and that I kind of focused on, but it's also the artist, has taken it in a direction which is important to you. But I guess the book, in terms of its premise, the idea, so it's about a condition called vulvodynia, which is chronic vulval pain, and it's a condition that's been under-recognised and under-diagnosed and misrepresented for centuries. And I wrote a PhD on it, and then I ended up spontaneously starting to write a novel, which wasn't planned. I was at a workshop and there was a prompt, we were given a prompt, and before I knew it I was writing a scene with two men, Victorian London, and one was the surgeon Isaac Baker Brown, who was a real life figure, and the other was a man who was consulting with him about his wife who had an inexplicable gynecological pain. And at that stage, the only words really they had for that kind of pain were hysteria. You know, that was the word really that kind of covered any sort of female disorder. So I decided to mainly tell the historical. I chose also to have a modern day timeline because I thought it'd be interesting to have someone like me but not me. She's younger than me, she hasn't had children, but she's an academic as I am. I thought it'd be very interesting to show what had changed and what hadn't changed since Victorian times. So Alice also has this pain, and because she can't get any easy answers, she goes on a journey of discovery. She starts to research, as I did for my PhD. The historical timeline is from Arthur's perspective, because I thought it's going to be really interesting to sort of think, how does a man respond to this situation? He has a wife he loves very dearly. Men in Victorian England held the power. What will he do with this power? He has a suffering wife. How will he respond when inevitably, I guess, has to go down a path where she's being diagnosed perhaps with hysteria and so on? So that was the premise of the book. What do these Alice is in a relationship she's married to, what do these two couples do in response to this situation?
And Alice responds with her sister-in-law.
Emily, yeah.
Corresponds with her at the time, no email or anything, so writing letters back and forth, and you discover a lot about Emily and Bea through this correspondence. And this is on the walls here. You can see all this writing, all these words, and they are representing the correspondence between Emily and Bea.
And I really liked that, because I did do it from Arthur's perspective, but some way into writing it, I had Arthur and I had Alice in the modern day, and it felt wrong to not have Emily's voice at all, because even though that kind of did represent it in some ways, that she, the women didn't have as much of a voice, I thought, no, she needs to be given a voice. So then I started to write her letters, and her voice came very easily.
Because her desperation comes through.
Oh, good.
Because she's like, I can't be the wife and mother that I'm supposed to be in the Victorian mores, of what you're supposed to do. And she's conflicted. And then they want to do this treatment on her, and she doesn't really know what it is, or whether does she have any power to say, no, I don't want this? So she's corresponding with Bea, who's a bit older, and Bea is saying, don't agree to this, and she's conflicted because she wants to do what's right for Arthur, but she doesn't know this surgeon from a bar of soap,
Absolutely. So Bea would be more of a feminist, really, than...
definitely. So now you can talk about the rook if you want to.
Yeah, sure. So Emily wasn't a historical figure, but Isaac Baker Brown was. So the rook, I have a rook. People say, what's the rook about? And everyone has a different kind of idea of what the rook is about. But for me, let me think. So the rook, the rook, appears through Arthur's timeline. It kind of crops up, different rooks crop up in different points in his narrative. And they represent really, or they reflect his state of mind at the time. But they also are related to his past and an elm thicket that he used to climb the trees in when he was young, and he used to collect eggs, and he found a rook egg there. And this elm thicket is very special to him. He associates it with his mother, and his mother, who is a very powerful influence in his life. And she always used to say to him, to fend for those who can't fend for themselves. So this is a bit of a voice in his head. Then you have Alice, and as she's researching, she's really interested in this idea comes up with this idea of two bodies. So she talks about herself like when you look in a mirror and you have usually a whole symmetrical body, or you have a body that sort of makes sense. And pain does something different for those who have had chronic pain. It kind of fragments the body. You have symptoms that don't necessarily make kind of sense. You have more of a body that's driven by sensation rather than sight. And so she had a body that kind of wasn't really making sense to her anymore. She had pain, and people are saying, well, you shouldn't have pain. There's no reason for it, or whatever it might be. So for her response is to become creative. What do you do with a fragmented body? So I won't go into exactly what the rook symbolises, because the two timelines are actually connected, but you don't find out until later in the book, so I don't want to spoil it. But the Rook is pivotal to the ways in which the two timelines are created, and the Rook is to do with love and creativity, and the ways in which the two are interact.
Whereas
But
in my work, the Rook is, if you can see here, the Rook is an eyewitness. For me, the Rook is a witness to something that's wrong. What's happening to these women? Can you see the straitjacket? And the woman on the bed is strapped down. This is what happened when they woke up from this operation. They were upset. I would be too. And they were put in a straitjacket. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, you're being surgically castrated, basically.
So yes, this was the operation. So Isaac Baker Brown was a real life surgeon, and he was in Victorian England. It was slightly different training, or radically different training to what it is now, really. You had physicians who went to university and usually come from a moneyed background, and then you had surgeons, and they didn't go to university, but they could come from anywhere, really, and they learned through an apprenticeship. And then you had apothecaries who dispensed compounded pharmaceuticals. So Isaac Baker Brown trained as a surgeon. He was a farmer's son, so he didn't come from money. He was already kind of, in some ways, at a disadvantage because he didn't come from money. But he gained a reputation quite early on from being prepared to operate, do quite radical, audacious was the word that was applied to him, operations. So he pioneered in ovariotomy, ovarian cancer and so on. I think about 12, I think it's 12 is in my brain, 12 women died as he did this, but he operated on his sister and she lived. So he really pioneered in that area, but already we can start to see just from that example that he was audacious, but women were dying. Then he went on to this idea that hysteria could be cured through surgery as well. So he began operating on women who came to him with a disordered body. And the idea then was that, and this wasn't uncommon, was that masturbation was the cause of some ills. It reduced nerve power and led to hysteria. And it was seen as a problem for men and for women. So he really kind of put this idea on steroids and basically said, okay, women are doing this, they're causing a loss of nerve power, they're setting off an 8-tiered disintegration from sort of hysteria, epilepsy, idiocy. Eventually they'll die. I have to, I hope this isn't too hard to hear, but this is quite confronting stuff. But this is real, you know, this is what happened. And so the idea from his point of view was that you remove the site of the excitation and then you get rid of the problem.
But women weren't really consulted.
Not necessarily, no, not really. So, and then of course, yes, they would be often bound or monitored very closely after the operation to make sure that they didn't start touching themselves again or kind of get it all set off again. So incredibly barbaric as you can imagine, but yes, there was that other side of it too, that women weren't necessarily consulted, the men had the power, or often people went into it not quite knowing exactly what was involved, that yes, you'll be having an operation, but you'll come out feeling a lot happier and a lot better. So the details of the operation might not be there. But he established a home in 1858 called the London Surgical Home for the reception of gentle women and females of respectability suffering from curable surgical diseases. And he had women that he operated on from gentle women. He was very keen to attract people with money, so he kind of advertised a bit, and he would hold evenings and so on, right through to so-called lunatics who he might operate on without any kind of consent. So eventually this really caught up with him. But I was going to I'll just read a really short extract about that. Oh yeah, please.
Just working through some of the ideas for the diorama. So you can see the surgical instruments and the dresses, which represent these women that are basically, they're not people, they're experiment sites. So that's why their dresses are sort of floating.
And what I liked about the diorama that you did was that you were saying that the dresses are from different eras. Yeah. And I liked that because my book is doing that too. It's showing, okay, this is something that's, you know, obviously we don't have the level of operation, but it's that sense of disempowerment and loss of agency that many women I know, including myself, experience when they go to somebody and they say, well, you've got vulvodynia, we'll give you a pudendal nerve block, and it's really often the treatments are really kind of hit and miss. Nobody really knows what they're doing.
So you don't feel listened to?
No, you don't feel heard at all. So this, I'll read a short extract, which is London, February 1866, and this is when Arthur and Emily have just consulted for the first time with Isaac Baker Brown, and he's assured, when Emily's getting dressed again, he's talked with Arthur and he's assured him that actually this is a really good thing, that you'll be able to go and have babies. It's not desexing her, unsexing her, it's actually kind of going to restore her as a wife and then a mother and so on. And they're walking after the after the consultation in Hyde Park. The sky is turning pink and the air sharp like glass. A real snowfall can't be far away. On the path ahead, a rook stabs at something with its dagger beak, scrapes at it, muscular neck working, then flies off to the west, its beak clamped on the unknown treasure. To its rookery, no doubt, to confer with the rest of the Parliament there. Arthur guides Emily to a space just off the path, a wooden bench where they can sit a little way removed from other walkers. He takes off his overcoat and folds it into a cushion, but she shakes her head, leans against the side of the bench and closes her eyes. Perhaps, but no, they must talk. Did he speak with you about the operation, he begins, about what it entails? Yes, I think so. He spoke of removing the cause of the irritation. Arthur has watched her wrestle with many feelings, sadness, fear, anger, despair, but never seen her like this, so utterly devoid of emotion or animation, as if she has given up. But they must continue. And you feel that this is the right course? I do not want an operation, but I want to be better. So if Father and you think it is the right thing to do, I cannot find it within me to refuse. I must trust you. But her face is dreary as she speaks the words. If it will take away the pain, then I will go against all that tells me to not do it. For a moment, his heart leaps. There is something that tells you not to do this? But she sighs and shakes her head. My thoughts are no longer to be trusted. He plunges on. And do you understand what he says has caused this? Speaking the words quickly, and why you may need to be watched closely afterwards? She turns her face to his, and for a moment he sees her eyes flash. In anger? Betrayal? She looks away and over the park. If you would think this of me, then you must go ahead and believe it, she says dully. He does not want this, he does not. But what is he to believe? What are they to do? Oh, how he would like to turn her face to his again, say the words that are in his heart. Emmy, my love, where have you gone? How can I return you to yourself? How can I return you to me? He shivers and stamps his numb feet. They must go home soon. He will ask Millie to warm Emmy's bed and see if Mrs. Fennell can whip them up a hot toddy. They will talk more tomorrow, this time in the comfort of their home. A man and woman push a perambulator up the path. Closer they come and closer. The man's hair is silky brown under his top hat. The woman's hair is golden, her attractive face rosy. Now, only yards away, they stop and lean over the little blue bundle in the perambulator, then debate something briefly, a little crossly, their faces worried and their eyes on the sky, their hands overlapping and plucking at blankets. Then they smile fondly at the baby and each other before hurrying up the path and out of sight. It could be us. Her voice is desolate. Oh, Arthur, why isn't it us? His own tears spill and freeze on his cheek. He slides along the bench towards her, puts his arm around her waist and sighs as she leans into him just as she used to. There is warmth under her clothing, beneath her crinoline, and he turns his face towards it, into it, feeling for who she is, seeking that place where they might meet within her, whispering, "It will be all right," reassuring her, "It will be all right," telling himself, "Surely, surely, it will be all right."
It's heartbreaking.
So, it's not all bad news, by the way. Just to let you know.
Story.
Yeah.
So if we go back to the beginning of these slides, then we can come to all the books.
Yeah, absolutely.
The exhibition is about a response to 6 books, one of them being the one we've been talking about, and also to ABC reportage of the war in Ukraine. So that's what the artwork, the body of work is about. So it takes the form of painting, sketchbooks, and dioramas and assemblages. So,
Could you talk about the process of how you respond to a book and how you go from that beginning point, how you respond to it, and how you begin to work something up in response to it in each case with the books?
might be best if we go to a slide.
Yep,
With an artwork, because otherwise it's a bit abstract, isn't it?
absolutely.
So if we go to
As an example,
I'm gonna go to this. So this book is called The Glad Shout. It was the first one I responded to with the Biblio Art Prize, and it is a Melbourne author, Alice Robinson, who's an academic at Melbourne Uni, and it's about the sea rising. It's set in Melbourne in the present day or the near future, and the sea rises, and basically Melbourne is flooded like right up to the Dianne ranges, and everyone's homeless basically. So people are, if they're able to escape, like boats are at a premium, as you can imagine. It's just so prophetic, because then we got all these floods, these amazing ongoing floods, and these poor people that have like up to their 4th desolation by flooding. So this is what I thought was really interesting about it, was these people were taking shelter in the MCG because they had nowhere to go. So they were getting themselves to the MCG. They were told that there was medical help and food there, and they could sleep in tents until it passed. But it just kept going. And there's no, the power goes out because it's shorted out from the water, and there's no sewage, there's no fresh water because the water's been polluted. And it's set, the main characters are a family, a small family with a little girl, a young family. The little girl is a toddler, and it's about the mum and the dad and their young parents, and they are trying desperately to get to safety, and they get separated. The dad doesn't come back after going out to find food and medical help. So it's really in a time when there's a lot of refugees, and we've got them on Christmas Island or wherever. Alice Robinson has turned it on its head and made the people of Melbourne refugees in their own country. And one of the motifs in the book is that they are trying to escape to Tasmania by raft. They're paying people smugglers amazing amounts of money to get across Bass Strait in a raft. So that's what that painting's about. So you can see below, you can see the installation, that's the MCG, and people are up in the stands. They only have the clothes on their back, and they're just trying to escape any way they can. That boat got sold, so that was the boat that was in Bass Strait, and this is depicting the way she writes about the voyage. It's pretty, it's gritty. So you can see some of these. This person is drowned in their own home because they couldn't get out. This person is half bent over in their crawl space in their roof. So you'll see when you go out there this work. So basically I did a lot of drawings. When I get a book, I just read it probably 2 or 3 times, as I said, and it sort of just swims around, and I keep taking notes. I make lists of words that are important to me, and I just draw, and I make things out of clay, and I just try and get my head around what am I trying to say here? What part of the book am I going to respond to? So I guess it's about mortality, it's about vulnerability, it's about thinking you're in control and you're really not in control. And only one little thing has to change. You know, like he's a baby. This is almost like when you see the work out there on the bench. This is almost like there's a lady, you can't see it in this slide, but a lady walking through wreckage with her shopping. This is, about the water being polluted. In all of my installations, there's the book itself. If you have a look, there'll be... So, if I go to... I'm not sure where was I? Oh, yeah, we've done that. So this is The Animals in That Country by Laura Jean McKay. She won the Stella Prize in 2021, I think it is, or 2020. So you can see that I don't know if anyone's read this story, but it is about a woman who's friends with a dingo. She works at like a place like the Australia Zoo in the north of Australia. She works at a place like that. This virus descends, and the form it takes is that people can hear the thoughts of animals, and they can't stop it. So the animals, say, for instance, in labs that are being experimented on, domestic animals, they can now hear their suffering, and it drives them mad. And there are people like that react in different ways, and some people react by being very angry with guns. And there's some people who just hide, like in here. And this man is running away from some domestic animals. It's a bit hard to see.
Because it's a bit of a road trip, isn't it, too, this book?
It's a road trip. So anyway, that's that one.
How do you choose which media to... Is that something that just feels right at the time?
I just feel as though I want impact. And sometimes painting... I'm a drawer, so I'm not really a painter. I'm learning how to be a painter by myself. But I've always done drawing, and I guess I've just wanted to find other ways to make an impact. And I make things, if I can't find them, because I use a lot of used materials, like a lot of tins and things I find and collect, and sometimes, like, I made that nest and that egg. This is a real wasp. This is a real grasshopper. That's a real moth. There's just a watch I found that I smashed with a hammer. Very satisfying. So I just find it's symbolic. I like to talk in symbols and make it into a narrative. And I want to suggest, I've always found I'm too literal in my work, and I wanted to be able to suggest and leave a lot up to the viewer, because then they own it. They are making it with me, if you know what I mean.
Exactly.
Making meaning.
It's the same with the book. You suggest, and if the reader doesn't do any work, it's not... Well, as a reader, I don't know how you feel, but if I'm not having to work a bit, it's not particularly satisfying. You need to kind of have some work to do.
It's kind of like spoon-fed.
Yeah.
Whereas if the artist or the writer makes you do some work, it means they're trusting you to do that work. It's like a pact, and it's intimate, and it's a compliment to you as a reader.
And it finishes the creative process off too, doesn't it? Because you can create something. I was very happy when I finished my book, but there's something about it being received by people reading it that kind of finishes that kind of creative process, which is really exciting
so
too.
For instance, when now commercial art is all done by graphics, when I trained as a commercial artist, you were an illustrator, right? And basically you're not suggesting anything. You're just drawing what's there and glamorising it. That's it. It's not a collaborative process, whereas fine art is a collaborative process between the viewer and the artist. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's up to you. It's your personal experience with that artwork.
You said you were saying before about if you can't find it, you make it. Yeah. So is there anything you've thought, well, I just can't make this, or do you just keep persevering until you've got something that you're happy with?
Go outside in the garden and scream.
Yeah.
Do weeding. You weeds. Or go to gym and work really hard. Sometimes it just doesn't work. You just start again. You just start again. You just say, okay, that didn't work. I know not to do that next time. But I just find a different way of doing it, I suppose. Like I use different materials. You know.
And you were saying earlier or last night about the way in which ladders figure in your artworks too. Do you have an example there?
I've got an example.
She has ladders that seem to be a repeat motif.
Yeah, so you see this person is trying to escape. See, this guy is being aggressive to that guy, because a lot of these stories about dystopia is about bringing out the best in people and the worst in people. And we know ourselves in those situations that happens. It's human nature, you know. So back here we've got another ladder. This person's trying to escape. This man is reaching for a ladder that's too far away. This person's trying to get out of that picture there. Is trying to get out of a car that's flooded. So I guess my work is a lot about vulnerability, about things being beyond your control, and that meeting point between the natural world and the built world, and where we think we have control, and one thing can be tweaked, like rainfall, like bushfire, like a change in season, a change in temperature. And what we think is control is not control at all. And I like this intersection between the natural world and the built world. So this one is about the book The Stranding. And it's a UK author, and it's another dystopia. It's about a nuclear disaster. So the tensions, which is so timely, because the tensions between the East and the West are coming to a head, and it's happening in Europe. I think it's Russia and I don't know what other country, I can't remember. But the bomb goes off, and this is set in New Zealand. So the lady is from the UK visiting to New Zealand, and she knows about this stranded whale, and she meets a stranger on the beach who's also there for the stranded whale, for a different reason. He's a photographer. And they both know the end of the world's coming, because the fallout is headed toward them, because it's in the northern hemisphere and they're in the southern hemisphere. So they get into the mouth of this deceased whale and shelter in there, and that's how they survive. And when I read that on the back of the synopsis on the book, it just hooked me. I had to read it. So this is not a Biblio Art Prize one. It's just one I decided to read. So you can see the whale, that's made from clay and wire. So I've done an armature of wire and then put clay over it in many layers. And this, you'll see the model out there. This is resin here. And this is a framework, a wooden framework that I've then sculpted sand dunes. And then that, there you can see the lady there trying to rescue the whale, but of course she can't. There's a passage in it where the whale is expiring and she's accepted she can't save it, and she's slumped next to the whale, but she's right next to the eye. and she talks about the sensibility of this animal, this massive eye, you know. It's quite touching. And then this one goes into the next. Oh, that's the framework, the diagram for the framework of this, and then it goes into this, which is they have to go into the nearest town to try and get food. There's nobody, they're the only survivors they know of, and they have to ransack through what's left of the town, and they find some canned food. And he was staying in a caravan, so that's why I made this caravan. So this caravan is made out of balsa wood. You'll see it in there. And like I've made everything. So there's the little book. I've made the fences, the painting at the back, the power poles. Yeah.
It's really interesting. Yeah, so I was just going to say it's so interesting how whales come up so frequently. So we've got fathoms and the stranding, the animals in that country. They seem to be something that are coming up in these dystopias as well. Yeah.
Well, the lady that wrote Fathoms, that's this book here, she is a marine biologist. So this is not a novel, this is a non-fiction text, but it's a narrative non-fiction. So it's very engaging. So she's a marine biologist, she's lived this stuff. But originally she got caught up in it because she witnessed a stranding in her younger life, mass stranding, and she wanted to know why. Why does this happen? And that's what led her to her life's work. And her name is Rebecca Giggs. Yeah, and I just learnt so much about the life of whales through reading this. And you can see it's won some awards, and it is just so affecting. And so the way I've responded to that is that's the armature of the whale I was telling you about. So this sort of very intricate wire framework, and these are all the preparatory kind of explorations I've done. So what's the next one? So this is about the stranding as well. So this is the bomb. So I did a lot of research about atom bombs. So starting from the one that was dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, which was called Little Boy, they are massively more powerful now and scary. Whenever someone talks about it now, I just shudder because I know how much more powerful they have become. So this one is called Big Ivan because that's there's two really big Russian bombs. One's called the Tsar bomb and one's called Big Ivan, and they are multiple hundreds of times stronger than the one from Nagasaki and Hiroshima. So it's a bit scary. So, yeah, I've been doing these comparisons of this form to the jellyfish form. And I just wanted, you'll see this work is beside a whale because the whale is surfacing into this world that the humans have wrecked. And whales are millions, you know, that species is millions of years old. So that's the whale I'm talking about that's surfacing. And this is about the stranding, this is about fathoms. But it's all about the life of the whale. This is a calf here. So I've concentrated on humpbacks because that's what I've mostly read about. And, that's the brothers.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about this one. Yeah, this is Bicycle Thieves.
The Bicycle Thieves. So Tony Birch, Australian Koori man, has written 12 short stories in this volume here, and I chose one of them because it's just, some of them are stories about Koori people and First Nations people. I didn't feel qualified to take that on because I'm not a First Nations person. So I chose The Bicycle Thieves. It just captivated me. And I called it The Brothers because in the story, the main characters, so it's these two brothers that look after each other. And they are set in the 1960s in Melbourne. in an area like Fitzroy that before it's gentrified. So I've got the Melways map in the background. I didn't make the bike, but I made the children and the crate. So in the story, this is a really old, like 1920s, 1910s sort of heavy bike, no brakes, you know, and it's been given to them. So this is the drawings, and that's the main, the whole installation, which you'll see out there. So this just shows you all the iterations that it goes through, all the different drawings of trying to captivate. What am I trying to say? How am I going to do it? Is it going to stick down? Am I going to use make things for it, or use what stuff I've already got in my collection, like old tins, old boxes?
You've done quite a lot of assemblage and diorama kind of work. Do you think that's because you're responding to a book, or is that just the way that you have been kind of heading anyway? Because it seems to just create a world, that three-dimensionality.
I feel as though the assemblage and the diorama is like a stage, and that's why I write it like a stage. It's like a stage where you see a play and you suspend disbelief for that period of time where you're watching the play, and you're in that world, totally in that world. And that's what happens with a book. So I guess, maybe to some extent, but I didn't plan it that way.
You're just responding to the work.
I did, yeah. I just sort of felt these are the materials I've got and they're calling out to me to be used. Like these natural forms here, which I collect, and I've got boxes and boxes of these materials.
So mummified animals and so on.
Yeah, that's like a mummified bird that was found in leaf litter. But this is called Damages, and it's relating to fathoms, and it's about the impact of our technologies on marine life as well as the climate in general. And so you can see this is a bushfire situation. This is the longline netting that's used with a lot of fishermen, commercial fishermen. I didn't have that boat, I had to make that out of clay. And this is like all the damages that happens to wildlife. So it's a sea lion with netting wrapped around it, a seahorse with those, sticks from our COVID tests floating around. And this is a coal-fired power station. This is an oil rig which is made out of clock parts. I don't know if anyone else sees it or realises it, but I know I'm using stuff that would be in a tip, that's a sea lion with wire and fishing line around it, and there's a turtle, same thing. And this is the sound pollution. So there's a whole number of, in fathoms, we find out that there's a whole array of ways that marine life are being subject to pollution. So it's in the air, it's in the water, it's sound, chemicals, oil, petroleum products. But I was really surprised by the sound pollution. It deafens them. When they are stranded, and then scientists take portions of their blubber to do a necropsy, because an autopsy is a person, whereas a necropsy is any other that isn't a human. They find that there's residues of carcinogens in their blubber. They find air bubbles which in their vital organs, which are caused by these, like the sound created when they're doing gas and oil exploration and they're blasting the sea floor. Not only are they releasing carbon dioxide that's been stored for millions of years under the sea floor, they're also deafening whales.
And I guess confusing their navigation and so on as well.
It deafens them, confuses them. It's like a barrier, it's like an invisible wall they can't get around. It kills krill larvae, which obviously is whale food. It completely decimates scallop beds. This is just examples of what it does. So we think, okay, so oil and gas exploration, releases carbon dioxide when we burn it. It's a lot more to it than that. So, when you look at it, you will just see that there's a lot more to it than... This is like the shrinking ice, compacted ice that the polar bears rely on, which is shrinking, and they're starving because they need hard ice in order to feed, to hunt and feed. So that's part of fathoms. This is part of fathoms too. You wanted to ask?
No, I was going to, when you're ready though, move on to, because you also have a piece that's responding to reportage rather than a book, but when you're ready, it's fine.
I think it's in there. So there's some drawings to do with the... What did I just do?
You reached the end, maybe.
No.
There we go.
There's a grid of 12 paintings. That's about fathoms and about the plastics that are in the ocean that are not going away anytime soon.
You know what really strikes me about all of this is the amount of work involved, the sheer work. I mean, not only are you researching, so you do a considerable amount of research, but you also, there are so many stages to your process as well.
Yeah.
I think it's not just a matter of bunging everything together, is it? It's very, very carefully
One of this,
considered.
for instance, is like 6 months' work.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about this.
I was supposed to be getting ready for this exhibition, and the Ukraine war started, and I went, what? We're in the 21st century. Hello, everybody. How is this okay? These people didn't do anything. So it's done from the point of view of the civilians that are impacted. So it's very dense. There's a lot of meaning in here. So these layers like words, maps, and then on top of the layers there's things like that's journalism here with those two boxes there. This is a poster that was being used in a demonstration in the UK and also in Europe of people demonstrating against... This here is a TV with the words "blood on your hands" written across it. I don't know if you're aware, in Moscow and the main capitals of Russia, their TV stations are all controlled. There's only like 2 or 3, and they only show what's acceptable. And someone hacked into the TV program and wrote across the screen, "blood on your hands." And that's why I called this invasion "blood on your hands." But, so it's just my reaction as news was rolling in. This has gone through 6 or something progressions where I've not liked what it was doing. I had to keep changing it so it said what I wanted it to say. So there's a lot of reused stuff. This is shrapnel from a bomb site. This is a woman who was transporting her children through a checkpoint and they shot the car even though it had the sign "children" on the window. They shot them anyway. This is a bombs falling. This is the landmines and the booby traps inside homes after they've finished occupying a village and they booby trap the homes. I don't know whether you know about that. This is the people in the underground, in the railway underground, living in there because it's the safest place, and the hospitals that had to go into basements, and then just all these hands, people saying, stop doing this, don't do this, and it's still going. And I started making this when it was starting to happen. So I was just so angry, and one of my sons, I've got 3 sons, the eldest said to me, "This is depressing, Mum, you've got to stop doing this." And I said, "On the contrary, this is making me feel better. I feel so helpless,
That was a question I had for you too. How are you? Have you been changed by creating these artworks?
Yeah, I think so. I think everything you read and everything you make changes you, and it just sort of swims around in you. And
I think there's a lot to be said for anger too. I know it's an emotion that people sort of see as a negative sometimes.
Confronting.
Yeah, or just like, it's like a negative type thing, but...
It's not very ladylike.
Well, no. It's very, very healthy, and it was my primary emotion before in writing my book. Yeah, exactly. And it seems like it's a word that you've used a lot too. It's something that we talked a little bit about that whole thing about when something's unfair, you feel that something's unfair, unjustified. You've got to do something about it, yeah.
And I felt really like, what, at different points, why am I doing this? Who do I think I am doing this? I mean, I'm not making any difference. And I read in this book by
yes.
Humanity's Moment by this woman, Joelle Gerges, and she is a marine scientist or a scientist of some sort, and she is on the IPCC panel, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, and she sees this data coming in one after the other proving this is the case. And she said that the way she stopped herself being depressed and going down was to go and look at art or listen to music or see a film or read a book. And I thought, okay, I'm all right now.
Yeah. You're doing the right thing.
I'm on the right track. It's okay. But I'll read something that she said. Art has always been humanity's best way of processing the world around us. Artists have always used their sensitivity and imagination to help people feel something that compels them to act. It helps people tap into something universal. Art helps break down the huge, intangible issue of climate change into a more manageable human scale. And she's saying we need storytellers because the scientists, people just turn off when they listen to data or see figures or graphs, unless you're really into that, which I'm not. But if you tell a story, the example, then you're like, hey, this is not okay. I'm not going to vote for those people, or I'm going to go and do this, clean up beaches. I don't know, whatever you want to do. But, it's like you find your place in that. Instead of being a bystander, you become engaged. Yeah, so...
Yeah, so we've been talking for a while. Did you want to do a little bit more, or we can see whether people have questions at some point?
I'll see what else. Oh, that's just the same thing. Oh, right there.
There we go. Maybe we can see if anyone has any questions, because there's a lot there to respond to.
Must be glazing over.
Yeah.
Josephine, I'm wondering with your PhD, I don't know how you pronounce the word,
Vulvodynia.
Did you ever consider writing a memoir? Because that would have reached so many people, like fellow sufferers and also those of us who don't know about this.
Sure. So my PhD was a memoir. It was an investigative memoir, an autoethnography. And I initially tried to get it published, but it was quite a big, unwieldy beast. I had one publisher said, look, we all read it and we all loved it, but we don't usually publish debut memoir. I think it was one of those things that nobody really knew how to place it, because it was a memoir, it was psychology, it was feminism, it was neurophysiology, it was all sorts of things. And I tend to lose confidence quite easily, so I tried for a little while and then I kind of just didn't have the heart to keep trying. So I went away from it, but what I ended up doing was writing and publishing personal essays. So I've published about 5 or 6 personal essays, and they're all drawn from the PhD, so they are from my personal perspective. So ideally it'd be great either to, get something that's usable from the PhD, or to have enough essays and have a collection of personal essays, because I agree with you. I did go on to write the fiction because I think in some ways fiction reaches people who might not otherwise read as well. So memoir and fiction appeal to different people. And it was a kind of distancing thing for me too. I really enjoyed writing it. But I agree. I think that there's something very direct about memoir. The other thing is too, there's quite a lot of memoirs published over the last few years that are about the disordered female body, to do with, there's a book called Hysteria by Katarina Bryant. I'm just trying to think of them all. There's 3 or 4, and I kind of felt glad that I'd done a novel at this time, but I certainly don't rule a memoir out, and if I can get those personal essays together. There is actually, if you go to my website, there's links to most of the personal essays as well.
Because I would have thought the hybrid genre would be just perfect, like, you know, melding the memoiring with
Yeah.
the reportage.
To be honest, it is. I think my memoir was good, but I think I've learned my writing is a lot better now, so I'd probably be better to sort of start again in some ways. I learned how to write after my PhD, ironically, by teaching it and by writing the book. But yeah, okay, maybe, you know, a bit of incentive. Thank you. Anybody else?
Anybody got any questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dianne, in Eye of the Rook, I noticed that the rook had a tie around the leg. Just wondered, did that signify? It just seemed to be possibly I saw it wrong, but in the slide that you showed.
It was in something that it was caught in, or
Yes.
That's probably
A part of the nest or something? maybe?
part of the nest.
Yeah.
I don't know. I had to try and wire it in so it wouldn't move. So that might have been what it was.
Yes.
Oh,
So that there is
that's
just before I finished it.
so that's its feet, is it?
It's intermediate
Yeah.
feet before I got it organised, because I just don't. I do a lot of stuff that I've never done before. This, you mean here? This one here?
No, it
No,
was
we're
the
talking
previous
about
one.
the-
Okay.
That was the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, they were just improvised feet. That it was to just get it to stand and try and get the angle of the head right, and just experimenting. There's a lot of experimenting. It doesn't. Very rarely does something just happen and you're like, aha, I've done it. You know, it doesn't work that way.
it's fabulous looking through that, you know, that window.
Yeah, and you can see, I think it's quite extraordinary if you look at the diorama afterwards, the size of these tiny little surgical instruments at the bottom there, there's forceps and so on. It's just the meticulous detail is quite staggering.
It frequently didn't work, and because I've got arthritis in my hands, and some days they're better than others, and some days you're like, they're not listening to the swearing at all.
Right.
So
Very good.
it's just a matter of adapting. We were talking about that, adapting.
Yeah, you have to adapt.
Yeah, so this is the result of probably 2 years of work.
Yeah, and I think that's, well, to me, that's really impressive because it's clearly 2 years of intensive work.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's not like I'll just do a little bit today.
No.
Yeah.
It's every day.
Yeah. Are you exhausted? Or?
Oh, yeah. I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
In fact, my doctor has said, you have to rest.
Okay.
And I'm like, yes, when I'm finished, I'll rest.
So you're going to rest
And
now?
Next time I'll see her, she'll say, did you rest? Because I'm getting pains down my
Yeah.
arms, and because I have neuralgia, the base of my neck, everything goes that, which affects your arms. And anyway,
Definitely time
one day
for a
I'll
break.
listen to her. I'm a bit like a bloke in that way. Anyway, yeah, but you know, you just get focused on what you're doing, and you're just like, I've got to finish it.
Absolutely, and you forget your body. I know when I'm writing, I forget my body too, and which is quite good because I have vulvodynia myself, so it sort of distracts me from the sensations. Yeah, Joe.
I would love to know what's next for each of you.
Oh,
Okay.
lying on the couch with a straw and whiskey.
I've started something, and actually being here I've really been blocked with it. I've written 10,000 words over a year and a half or something, so incredibly slow, and I've just been like pulling hen's teeth or whatever that expression is. But I've actually been quite sort of inspired by this trip, and I'm really feeling keen to get back to it. It's set. I'm working on a novel. It wasn't planned. Like this kind of wasn't planned. It seems to be set towards the end of the century. it's a dream detective. She is trying to find out, they're trying to work out what's going on. These people are dying with the condition called creping, which is the last, where their skin goes crepe-like, and it's the last sign of the effects of nanoplastic on DNA.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And she it's a mutation, but she has the capacity to go into other people's dreams. It's not something that she does voluntarily, but when she's asleep, she's like a lucid dreamer, like a kind of highly developed lucid dreamer, but she also will find herself in other people's dreams. And they've identified DNA that is resistant to this creping, and it's from dead people's DNA, and they're going into the dreams of these dead people to work out.
Exposed to all this plastic?
No, more that they have, their DNA has the capacity to resist the effects of it, and they've tried gene therapy, but that hasn't worked. So she and 2 other dream walkers are going into the dreams of these people, these dead, through their DNA, to work out what it is that makes them resistant to plastic, the condition which is called plastication, which is the last kind of effects of all the plastics that we're using now, and working down to nanoplastics. And creativity is kind of what a lot of it's about, and art, and the importance of creativity and art. But that's kind of where I've got to with it. Thanks for that question. Yeah.
I think I'll be drawing and painting when I finish drinking the whiskey. Which I do in private. I don't do it in public.
Thanks very much, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Dianne.
Thank you.